The rain had been falling since morning, steady and cold, washing the color out of the small town of Crestwood. The streets were quiet except for the soft hum of passing cars and the splash of tires through puddles. In the corner cafe at the end of Main Street, a woman sat by the window, her fingers curled around a cup of tea gone cold long ago. Her name was Elena Hayes, a schoolteacher who had forgotten how to smile. It had been a year since her husband Daniel's death, 1 year of mornings that all looked the same, of pretending to be okay for the children at school while feeling nothing inside. She had once been known for her laughter, her warmth, the way she made everyone feel noticed. Now, she lived in silence. Across the room, the cafe door opened with a soft chime, and a man stepped in, shaking the rain from his coat. He looked around as if searching for a familiar face but found none. His name was Ethan Cole, a mechanic from the town's edge, quiet, kind, with the kind of eyes that carried stories no one had asked to hear. He noticed Elena sitting alone, her expression distant. He hesitated before walking to the counter, ordering coffee, and taking the seat next to hers. "You like watching the rain too?" he asked softly, unsure why he had spoken. Elena turned, startled, then smiled faintly. "Not really. I just don't know what else to watch." He nodded. "Sometimes, the rain helps you hide the tears." That line, so honest, so raw, made her blink. It was as if he had seen right through the polite mask she wore every day. She looked at him closely then, noticing the faint scars on his hands, the weariness in his shoulders. "Do you come here often?" she asked, more out of curiosity than interest. "Every Tuesday," he said, smiling gently. "It was my wife's favorite place. I guess I kept coming because it felt like she might walk in one day and tell me to stop brooding." Elena froze for a moment. Two souls, both broken by loss, sitting side by side without realizing they were mirrors. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. He shrugged. "It's been 3 years. Time dulls the pain, but it never really disappears. You just learn to build around it." They didn't speak after that. The silence was comfortable, almost healing. When Ethan got up to leave, he nodded politely. "Take care," he said. Something in his tone stayed with her. Days passed, and somehow, Elena found herself at the cafe every Tuesday. And somehow, Ethan always happened to be there too. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. They shared stories about books, about how Crestwood had changed, about the people they had lost. One day, as they watched an old man struggling to cross the slippery street, Ethan suddenly stood and rushed outside, offering his arm. The old man smiled in gratitude, and for the first time in months, Elena felt warmth spreading through her chest. When Ethan returned, dripping wet but smiling, she said, "You didn't have to do that." "I know," he replied, shrugging. "But kindness is like a ripple. You never know how far it will travel." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. His words kept echoing in her head. Kindness is like a ripple. She realized she had spent so long grieving that she had forgotten how to give, how to matter to the world around her. The next morning, she baked cookies and took them to her students. Their faces lit up, and when one little girl hugged her and said, "Miss Hayes, you're the best teacher ever," Elena's heart cracked open a little more. She began volunteering at the community center, tutoring underprivileged children. She helped an old neighbor fix her garden, smiled at strangers, and even left small anonymous notes of encouragement on people's doors. Every time she did, she felt Daniel's voice in her mind saying, "You're still making the world better, Lena." One evening, Ethan came to the cafe later than usual. He looked tired, his eyes dim. "You okay?" Elena asked. He hesitated. "The garage might shut down soon. Not enough customers. I've been thinking of leaving Crestwood." The thought hit her harder than she expected. He had become part of her healing, a quiet presence, a friend who didn't demand anything. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "You've helped so many people here. They'll miss you." He smiled faintly. "Maybe. But sometimes, moving on is the kindest thing we can do for ourselves." Elena thought about that long after he left. That night, she stayed awake, writing something on a piece of paper before falling asleep on the couch. The next morning, she showed up at the garage with a basket of muffins and a poster that said, "Support Cole's Auto Helping Hands, Honest Work." She went around town, convincing people to bring their cars for repair. Within a week, business picked up again. When Ethan found out what she had done, he stood speechless in front of her. "Why would you do this?" he asked, his voice almost breaking. She smiled softly. "Because you taught me that kindness ripples." He laughed, a sound so genuine it made her heart flutter. "Then I guess I owe you coffee for life." Over the next months, their friendship deepened. They shared meals, laughter, and sometimes quiet moments by the lake where both had once scattered ashes of their loved ones. One evening, as the sun dipped below the hills, Elena said, "Do you ever feel guilty for being happy again?" Ethan looked at her, the sunset reflecting in his eyes. "Every day. But I also think they want us to live. Love doesn't die, Elena. It just changes form. Sometimes it becomes the kindness we give others. Sometimes it becomes the courage to start again." That night, she wrote those words in her diary, "Love doesn't die. It transforms." Slowly, she began painting again, something she hadn't done since Daniel's death. She painted faces, moments, laughter. Ethan helped her organize a small art exhibition at the community hall. At the opening, she stood nervously beside her paintings, unsure anyone would come. But people did, old students, neighbors, even strangers who had once received her anonymous notes. They looked at her art and saw life, warmth, kindness. One painting caught everyone's attention, a picture of a man holding an umbrella for a woman in the rain. The title read, "The Ripple." When Ethan saw it, he smiled, recognizing their first meeting. "It's beautiful," he whispered. Elena looked at him. "So are you." For a long moment, they stood there, surrounded by the glow of soft lights and murmurs of admiration, two broken souls who had found healing in each other. Time, as it does, kept moving. The seasons changed, and Crestwood bloomed again. Ethan and Elena began spending weekends together, fixing up the old orphanage building, organizing food drives, repairing bicycles for children. The town had started calling them the Light Makers. But one evening, Elena received a call from a hospital in another city. Her brother had been in an accident. She rushed there immediately, staying by his side for weeks. Ethan visited once, bringing her flowers and food, and sat quietly with her. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said softly. "Sometimes strength is letting someone hold you when it hurts." Those words wrapped around her heart like warmth in winter. When she returned home months later, the town had changed, new buildings, new people, but Ethan was waiting at the cafe, just as before. She sat across from him, smiling. "You waited?" He shrugged. "You don't leave light behind." For the first time in years, she reached across the table and took his hand. "I think," she said slowly, "that Daniel and your wife would be happy for us." He nodded, eyes misty. "I think they would." Years passed, and Elena's art grew famous beyond Crestwood. She never left the town, though it was where her heart had learned to heal. Ethan expanded his garage into a training center for young mechanics who couldn't afford college. Together, they built a foundation called the Ripple Project, offering scholarships, meals, and emotional support for families in need. People would often ask them where it all began, and they would smile and say, "in a little cafe on a rainy Tuesday." But more than the projects and the success, it was the way they lived that inspired others. They greeted everyone by name. They helped strangers without expecting thanks. They forgave, they listened, they loved deeply. One winter evening, as snow dusted the rooftops, Elena sat painting by the fire. Ethan came behind her, placing a blanket over her shoulders. "You ever think," he asked, "about how far one small act of kindness can go?" She smiled. "Every day. Because I'm still living in the ripple of yours." He kissed her forehead, whispering, "then let us never stop making waves." Years later, when both had grown old and their hands had lost their strength, the people of Crestwood gathered to celebrate 50 years of the Ripple Project. Elena and Ethan sat side by side on a bench outside the same cafe where it all began. Children played in the rain. Volunteers passed out food. Laughter filled the streets. Elena leaned against him, her voice soft. "You know what I've learned?" "What?" Ethan asked. "That the world doesn't remember the things we keep, it remembers the love we give. Kindness is the only thing that never dies." He nodded, squeezing her hand. "Then I guess we'll never really be gone." As the rain continued to fall, two old souls smiled at the world they had helped heal, proof that love, when shared through kindness, could outlast even time itself. And somewhere, in the quiet rhythm of the rain, their story kept echoing, reminding everyone that even the smallest act of love can become the brightest legacy.